You are now listening to Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium. Available on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Podbean, and most other podcast platforms. Tonight's episode is about the death of Dominique Dunne. So it's over to you now, Mark, to explain the death of Miss Dunne.
Dominique Ellen Dunne was an American actress who was born and raised in Santa Monica, California, in the United States. She made her on-screen debut in 1979 with a film for television called Diary of a Teenage Hitchhiker, and then later on in 1980 with the comedy series Breaking Away. However, her breakthrough role didn't happen until 2 years later in 1982, when she was cast as the teenager Dana Freeling in the blockbuster horror film Poltergeist, and due to the Poltergeist movie's huge success, Dominique Dunne was set to reprise her role in the following instalments of the franchise. However, on the 30th of October in 1982, she was strangled by her ex-boyfriend John Sweeney during an argument on the driveway of her West Hollywood home. Dominique was then quickly transported to the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, where she was placed on life support. However, she never regained consciousness, and over the following days, doctors who had performed various brain scans revealed to her family that due to oxygen deprivation, she now had no brain activity. So, on the 4th of November 1982, Dominique Dunne fell into a coma and then sadly passed away. Her ex-boyfriend, John Sweeney, was immediately arrested and charged with attempted murder. However, those charges were later dropped after Dominique Dunne's death, and subsequently he was charged with first-degree murder, to which he pleaded not guilty. Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in once again and listening to this rather sad episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a medium, an oracle card reader, a paranormal investigator, a ufologist, and a true crime buff. And just to give you a better idea of who I am and what I do, every Monday night, though occasionally on a Tuesday, allowing for bank holidays and busy weekends, I do a podcast on the many wide and various subjects that fall under the Unexplained banner. These include ufology, hauntings, disasters, and all sorts of paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, and the many missing people that often go unnoticed. So, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any other podcast platforms, again, please give us a like and a follow. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the true crime story surrounding the death of Dominique Dunne. And this week's necessary disclaimer. Well, this story is about a tale that involves the details, death and homicide of a young lady, so it may prove upsetting to some. You listen at your own discretion. Also, all opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts of the case still remain. I also apologise if I pronounce anything incorrectly. My English, although it is my first and only language, a thesaurus, it ain't. Anyway, let us get back to the story. So, the first question is, who was Dominique Dunne? Well, Dominique Ellen Dunne was born on the 23rd of November in 1959 and, as I mentioned in the introduction, was an American actress actress who was born and raised in Santa Monica, California, in the good old United States. She was the youngest child of Ellen Beatrice Griffin Dunne, who was a ranching heiress and activist, and Dominique Dunne, please don't get them mixed up, who was an American writer, investigative journalist and producer. Dominique Dunne had two older brothers, Griffin Dunne, who was an actor, producer and director, and Alexander Dunne, who, to be honest, I can't find any bio for. But one piece of movie trivia regarding Dominique's other elder brother, Griffin Dunne, is that he's probably best well known for his portrayal of the character Jack Goodman in the 1981 comedy horror film An American Werewolf in London. Dominique Dunne attended various schools throughout her young life. These included Harvard Westlake School in Los Angeles, Taft School in Watertown, Connecticut, and Fountain Valley School in Fountain, Colorado. After Dominique's graduation, she spent a year in Florence in Italy, where she studied art and learned Italian. She then studied acting at the Milton Katselas Workshop, and from there appeared in various stage productions, including West Side Story, The Mousetrap, and My Three Angels. In 1979, she made her on-screen debut in a television film called Diary of a Teenage Hitchhiker, and then played various reoccurring roles both in the 1980s drama series called Family and the comedy series called Breaking Away, which ran from 1980 to 1981. But despite all this regular work that she was getting, Dominique Dunne's breakthrough role was that of a teenager, Dana Freeling, in the blockbuster horror film Poltergeist from 1982. As after this, she ended up headlining the 1982 Western film The Shadow Riders and had another significant role in the 1980s crime drama series called Chips. Dominique Dunne first met John Thomas Sweeney, who worked as a sous chef at the Mar Maison restaurant, at a party in 1981. They dated for a few weeks, which then led them to moving in together into a one-bedroom house on Rangeley Avenue in West Hollywood. However, their relationship soon turned sour when, due to John Sweeney's jealousy and possessiveness, the young couple started fighting, which in turn led him to physically abuse his girlfriend Dominique. According to one account, on the 27th of August 1982, during one of the couple's many fights, John Sweeney yanked handfuls of Dominique Dunne's hair out by the roots, which then led to the frightened Dominique fleeing to her mother's home. Sorry, I'll get that right. Once there, and after a short time, Dominique and her father, Helen Dunne, were startled by a constant banging on the front door, only to find that it was John Sweeney himself demanding to be let in. However, Helen Dunne was having none of this intimidation and told him to leave, or she would get the police involved. A few days later, Dominique Dunne decided to return to the home that she shared with John Sweeney, and then the two of them, you guessed it, resumed their relationship. No, I promised myself that I wouldn't judge. On the 26th of September 1982, during another argument at their home, John Sweeney grabbed Dominique Dunne by the throat, threw her onto the floor, and then began to strangle her. A friend who was staying with the young couple at the time said that as soon as she heard the loud gagging sounds, she ran into the room where she saw Dominique Dunne being attacked by John Sweeney. Sweeney, obviously startled by their friend's sudden appearance, let go of Dominique's throat, with her then telling their friend that John Sweeney has just tried to kill her. However, Sweeney, being very matter-of-fact about the whole situation, denied this claim and asked Dominique to come back to bed. Pretending that she was going to comply with John Sweeney's request, Dominique Dunne then sneaked out of the bathroom window. Once in the car, she started the engine, at which time John Sweeney heard the noise, ran out of the house and jumped on the hood of the vehicle. She then stopped the car just long enough for John Sweeney to jump off the hood and speedily drove away. And so for the next few days she stayed with her mother, Helen Dunne, and sofa surfed at the houses of a few friends. She later phoned John Sweeney and finally ended their relationship, and after a time Sweeney moved out of the Rangeley Avenue home in West Hollywood, after which she moved back in and, as you would expect, changed all the locks. After this first short break, in part 2 we will look at Dominique Dunne's murder and the subsequent arrest and trial of John Sweeney that followed.
This show is brought to you courtesy of Neil Packer and the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. Find them online at www.hauntedresearchcentre.com or at 9 to 11 Regent Street, Hinckley, LE10 1AW. Open on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for guided tours of the haunted rooms at just £3 per person. Booking is essential at all times, and over 16s only, please, unless accompanied by an adult. The haunted rooms are extremely haunted, and paranormal activity could and has taken place at any time. Some areas and particular objects or items can be quite scary and unnerving. Membership is available for £25 to qualify for selective offers. And why not download the app, available on both iOS and Android, for only $3.99, to keep up to date with what is coming up at the centre.
On the 30th of October 1982, just a few weeks after John Sweeney and Dominique Dunne had broken up, Dominique was at her Rangeley Avenue home in West Hollywood rehearsing for the mini-TV series V with the actor David Packer. On a short but interesting side note here, David Packer, as well as appearing in V in the early 1980s, has also appeared in such films as RoboCop in 1987, You Can't Hurry Love in 1988, and Infested in 2002, and has also made various guest appearances in numerous television shows such as ER, Fame, St Elsewhere, CSI, and MASH. While Dominique Dunne was speaking to a female friend on her phone, John Sweeney had the operator break into her conversation. Noticing that she had another call on waiting, Dominique then told her female friend, and I quote,
"Oh God, it's Sweeney. Let me get him off the phone."
After about 10 minutes after Dominique's phone call conversation with both Sweeney and her female friend, John Sweeney then showed up at her home. Being very cautious, she first spoke to him through the locked front door. However, after a time, she agreed to speak to him on the porch while her fellow actor, David Packer, remained inside. Any pleasantries, although I'm sure there probably wasn't any, between Dominique Dunne and John Sweeney outside on the porch didn't last very long, because no sooner had they started to talk, they began to argue, and fellow actor David Packer, who was still inside the house at the time, said that he had heard a smacking sound followed by 2 screams and then a thud. Concerned, David Packer then called the police, but he was informed by them that, unfortunately, Dominique Dunne's home was out of their jurisdiction. Again, I promised myself I wouldn't judge. So David Packer then decided to phone a friend and told him that if he was found dead, John Sweeney was his killer. David Packer left Dominique Dunne's home in Rangeley Avenue through the back entrance, approached the driveway, stood by some nearby bushes and saw John Sweeney kneeling over Dominique's body, with Sweeney then telling him to call the police. When the police arrived, the responding police officers found John Sweeney standing by Dominique's unconscious body on the driveway, and with his hands in the air, he stated to them, and I quote, "I killed my girlfriend and I tried to kill myself." John Sweeney later testified that he and Dominique Dunne had argued, but that he could not remember what had happened after their exchange, claiming that he could only recall being on top of her with his hands around her neck. Dominique Dunne was transported to the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, where she was placed on life support. Over the next few days, doctors performed various brain scans, which unfortunately revealed that due to oxygen deprivation, she had no brain activity left, and that consequently she would never regain consciousness. So on the 4th of November 1982, just 19 days before her 23rd birthday, her parents took the heartbreaking decision and consented to have their daughter removed from the life support system. Meanwhile, back at her Hollywood home and to the night of the incident in question, John Sweeney was immediately arrested and charged with attempted murder. However, those charges were dropped after Dominique Dunne's death, and subsequently Sweeney was charged with first-degree murder, to which he pleaded not guilty. John Sweeney was also later charged with assault with intent to do bodily harm when, during a preliminary trial hearing, he admitted that he and Dominique Dunne did have a physical altercation on the 26th of September 1982. If you remember, this was the incident that I described in part 1, where their live-in friend said she heard loud gagging sounds and saw Dominique Dunne being attacked by her then-boyfriend John Sweeney, and where she then drove off, making sure he had climbed off the hood of the car first. The incident was brought up again, mainly due to some of her fellow cast members, whilst they were filming an episode of the 1980s TV series Hill Street Blues, noticing visible bruises on her face and body. John Sweeney denied assaulting Dominique Dunne on the aforementioned date of the 28th of September, claiming that she had accidentally incurred the bruises when he tried to prevent her from leaving their home. Okay, and again, I'm not judging. John Sweeney's trial began on the August of 1983 and was presided over by the Judge Burton S. Katz, with John Sweeney himself deciding to take the stand in his own defence. He testified that he had not intended to harm Dominique Dunne on the night that he arrived at her home. He also claimed that the two of them had also reconciled and that they were planning to move back in together and that they had daily discussions about getting married and having children. On the night in question of the 30th of October, John Sweeney claimed that Dominique Dunne had abruptly changed her mind about any reconciliation, telling him that she had been leading him on and lying to him about getting back together. And that it was at this point John Sweeney said he, and I quote, exploded and lunged towards her. John Sweeney then claimed to have no recollection of attacking Dominique Dunne until he discovered that he was on top of her with his hands around her neck. Well, I suppose when or if you ever do find yourself on top of someone with your hands around their neck, then it's probably a dead cert that something is amiss. But then again, I'm not judging. It was at this point John Sweeney claimed that he realised Dominique Dunne was not breathing. So he decided it would be a good idea to attempt to revive her by making her walk around, but according to him, she kept falling down. Yeah, that tends to happen a lot when you try walking someone around who isn't breathing. God, idiots. Anyway, John Sweeney went on to say that after the walking around didn't work, surprise, surprise, he then attempted to give her CPR, which did nothing but cause her to vomit. John Sweeney's next claim was that after he too had vomited, he ran into Dominique Dunne's house and attempted to kill himself by consuming 2 bottles of pills, after which he then returned to the driveway, laid down beside her and waited for the aforementioned pills to take effect. John Sweeney's court-appointed attorney, Michael Adelson, argued that his client's actions were neither premeditated nor were they executed with malice. Instead, Michael Adelson maintained that his client, meaning John Sweeney of course, having been provoked by Dominique Dunne's alleged deception, acted in the, and I quote, heat of passion. Dominique Dunne's family disputed John Sweeney's claim that she had reconciled with him, insisting that he only went to her home on the 30th of October in an effort to persuade her to reconcile after she told him that their breakup was permanent. And not only that, but the prosecution and the police investigators also dismissed John Sweeney's version of events, mainly due to there being no physical evidence that he had consumed any pills in an attempt to commit suicide at the time of his arrest, and I should imagine the absence of any vomit from around the crime scene from either himself or Dominique was also a little bit of a giveaway. After this second short break, in part 3, we will look at the continuing trial and the aftermath of John Sweeney's sentencing.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk, or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
The trial, the police, upon their arrival at Dominique Dunne's residence, said that they found John Sweeney's demeanour to be both, and I quote, calm and collected. And Deputy Frank DeMilo, who was the first officer to arrive on the scene, testified that John Sweeney told him, and again I quote, "Man, I blew it. I killed her. I didn't think I'd choked on her that hard, but I don't know, I just kept on choking her. I just lost my temper and I blew it again." The medical examiner who performed Dominique Dunne's autopsy determined that the victim had been strangled for at least 3 minutes, and given those autopsy results, both the police and prosecutors dismissed the defence's argument that John Sweeney acted unconsciously, reasoning that in the 3 minutes in which he strangled Dominique, he had both ample time and opportunity to regain control of his actions, which in turn might have saved her life. To try and establish a history of John Sweeney's violent behaviour, the prosecution called on one of his ex-girlfriends, a young lady named Lillian Pierce, and asked her to testify at the trial. However, at the request of John Sweeney's attorney, Lillian Pierce did testify, but without the jury being present. She stated that she and John Sweeney had dated on and off from 1977 to 1980, and that during that time, whilst in the relationship, John Sweeney had assaulted her on at least 10 separate occasions. And as a result, she was hospitalised twice for the injuries that she has sustained, and during one of the assaults she suffered a perforated eardrum, a collapsed lung, and at a later date, a broken nose. Lillian Pierce's testimony did not go down too well with John Sweeney, as on hearing what she had to say about their relationship, he became enraged, jumped up from his seat and ran towards the door leading to the judge's chambers. However, before he could do anything else, he was quickly subdued by 2 bailiffs and 4 armed guards, and was then handcuffed to his chair, where he started to cry. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. But again, I'm not judging. John Sweeney then apologised to the court for his outburst, for which Judge Burton S. Katz accepted. John Sweeney's court-appointed attorney, Michael Adelson, then requested that Judge Katz rule Lillian Pierce's testimony as inadmissible because it was prejudicial, meaning it was harmful or unfairly influential, with the judge granting the request, which meant that the jury didn't learn about Lillian Pierce's damning testimony until after the trial. And on top of that, the judge, who also refused to allow any testimony from Dominique Dunne's mother, Helen Dunne, as well as any of Dominique's friends, citing that their statements about John Sweeney's abusive nature were just hearsay. On the 29th of August, still with the ongoing trial, the defence attorney, Michael Addleston, also requested that Judge Catt rule that the court lacks sufficient evidence to try John Sweeney on the charge of first-degree murder, mainly because predetermination was not established. Ugh. And again, Judge Catt granted the request, and as such, the jurors were instructed to consider the charges of manslaughter and/or second-degree murder. Deputy District Attorney Stephen Barshop later said in an interview that this decision, along with Judge Catt's previous rulings barring the testimonies of both Sweeney's ex-girlfriends Lillian Pearce and Dominique's mother and friends, seriously undermines the prosecution case against John Sweeney. After 8 days of deliberation, on the 21st of September 1983, the jury acquitted John Sweeney of second-degree murder and instead found him guilty of the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter. He was also convicted of a misdemeanor assault for the physical altercation, the one I mentioned earlier in parts 1 and 2 of this show, that he had with Dominique Dunne that occurred on the 26th of September 1982. As you can probably imagine, Dominique Dunne's family was totally outraged by this verdict, calling it, amongst other things, an injustice. And after Judge Bert Ness Katz excused the jury, he commented on the judicial system being upheld. However, Dominique Dunne, the victim's father, vented his anger by yelling at the judge the following statement, and I quote, "Not for our family, Judge Katz!" And on top of that, before Judge Katz left the courtroom, Dominique Dunne's father also accused him of purposely withholding John Sweeney's ex-girlfriend Lillian Pearce's testimony from the jury, which would have established his violent history with women. But this verdict didn't just shock the Dunne family and friends, as the victims' right group called Victims for Victims, which is a group that was founded by the actress Teresa Saldana, started to protest against the verdict by staging a march outside the courthouse. And afterwards, several media outlets started to debate the events of the trial and the verdict, with several outlets criticising Judge Katz's ruling, which many argued were preferential towards the defence of John Sweeney. Also, one local Los Angeles television station, who ran a viewers' poll, rated John Katz as the 4th worst judge in Los Angeles County. On the 17th of November, later that same year of 1983, John Sweeney was sentenced to just 6 years in prison for manslaughter, which was the maximum sentence he could receive, plus an additional 6 months for the assault charge from the 26th of September 1982. Curiously enough, at John Sweeney's sentencing, Judge Katz criticised the jury's verdict of manslaughter, stating that he felt Dominique Dunne's death was, and I quote, "a case pure and simple of murder with malice." The jury's foreman, a gentleman named Paul Spiegel, later told the media that both he and his fellow jurors were surprised by Judge Katz's criticism, calling his comment, and I quote, "a cheap shot." Paul Spiegel felt that Judge Katz's criticism did not stem from their verdict of voluntary manslaughter, but that it was more likely coming from the harsh criticism he received afterwards. He even went on to say that had the jury been provided with the opportunity to hear all the evidence, meaning Lillian Pearce's damning statement along with other witness testimonies, it would have convicted John Sweeney of murder. Hindsight, eh? After the trial, John Sweeney was then incarcerated in a medium-security prison in Susanville, California. He was released on parole in the September of 1986 after just serving only 2.5 years of his 6.5-year sentence. After his release, he was then hired as a head chef at an upscale restaurant in Santa Monica in California. Griffin Dunne, Dominique's brother, after he discovered where John Sweeney was working, stood outside the restaurant along with their mother Ellen Dunne and handed out flyers to patrons that read, and I quote,
"The food you will eat tonight was cooked by the hands that killed Dominique Dunne."
So, eventually, John Sweeney quit his job and moved out of Los Angeles, and subsequently accused the Dunnes of harassing him, and in an effort to avoid further altercations, he decided to change his name. In a later interview in which the victim's father, Dominique Dunne, discusses his daughter's murder, the writer shared that, for a time, he employed the services of a private investigator, a man named Anthony Pellicano, and asked him to follow John Sweeney and report on his actions and whereabouts. And according to Anthony Pellicano, and at the time of writing this show, John Sweeney had moved out to the Pacific Northwest, assumed the name of John Mora, and continues to work as a chef. And at a later interview, Dominique's father said that he decided he no longer wished to squander his life by following John Sweeney. Dominique's funeral was held on the 6th of November 1982 at the Church of Good Shepherd in Beverly Hills, where her godfather delivered the eulogy. At the request of her mother, Ellen Dunne, her daughter's kidneys and heart were donated to transplant recipients. Dominique Dunne is buried in the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles.
Thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next episode, show number 131, we are going to be looking at the Radium Girls. The Radium Girls were female factory workers who contracted radiation poisoning from painting radium dials and watch dials with self-luminous paint. After being told that the paint was harmless, the women in each facility ingested deadly amounts of radium after being instructed to point their brushes on their lips to give them a fine tip. Dentists were among the first to see numerous problems among these dial painters, with dental pain, loose teeth, lesions and ulcers, with many of the women developing anemia, bone fractures and necrosis of the jaw.
This show was written and researched by myself, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. as usual, the pronunciation's all mine. The actors in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes and Denise Poolar. With special thanks, of course, to Neil Packer and the staff at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley. And a big thank you to everyone for listening. We never run out of ideas here at the office for Mark's Unexplained World podcast. But if you know of any other intriguing stories under the Unexplained banner, including ufology, hauntings, disasters, and any other sort of paranormal phenomena, as well as true crime, unsolved crime and missing people, just drop me a direct message and I will see what I can do. I'll also include the name of the person who suggested the idea, if they wish, in the end credits of the podcast. And again, just to add, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. I thank you in advance. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember, guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. This show and all its contents are covered by basic copyright of Mark the Medium.